Welcome to You Build Terrain. This is a channel that's dedicated to building terrain and display boards for your hobby and the miniature wargaming or tabletop wargaming. As part of what we do in our hobby, some of what we need to do is to have great boards to play on and have great display boards, not only for our homes, but when we go away for tournaments, being able to display your army and really have very cool terrain so that your story narrative of the game can be really great. I'm always inspired when I see a nice table set up and ready to go. And we do build terrain for lots of different tabletop games, from 40K to Warhammer, the Old World, any of the Games Workshop games, any of the bolt action games, the Flames of War, I do a good bit for 15 millimeter. And we just want you to have a good time, enjoying this part of the hobby. And I'm really, this is about you being able to build a skill set so that you can do this on your own at whatever level, because the effort really matters. But if you don't even know where to start, it makes it very difficult to, put together stuff. Today's episode is really about Warhammer 40K. I'm going to do something for any of the futuristic games that you might be playing, but this is a Warhammer 40K Battle of Macragge terrain piece here that you can see. I dug this out from my pile of shame, and I said, I could probably put this together with another downed Imperial flyer and have either one or two tables worth of terrain that I can use for my futuristic or science fiction based games. And I really love this piece. It's always been one of my favorites, has a lot of great detail. And we're just going to show you how I would put it together for me. How I do it might not work for everyone. And I don't know that you can stumble across, the Battle for Macragge set like this, like I did, but there's always pieces like this that are, you're either printing or buying from someone or maybe picking up from the gaming company where they, have built a piece of terrain. And I'm going to show you what I would do to make sure that you have the longevity of the terrain piece, stylistically being really well put together, and something that's going to really look good on the tabletop. Because if the tabletop looks good and the durability is really high, you're going to enjoy your games more. Anyway, we're going to get started with this in just a minute, and I'm going to tell you the whole list of things that you might need to put together a project like this. And this video will probably be about 25-30 minutes long, as well as we'll probably have 3 or 4 pieces to this series where we talk about building it, getting it attached to the base plates, which is what we're going to do today. And then, adding sand and other accessories to this piece. And then we'll be, priming the piece, painting the piece, and then finishing the piece off with things like flocking and also with, a top coat to keep the durability, like I said, high, because if you build a piece like this, you want it to be in your collection for a very long time. Or if you're a tournament organizer, you want to be able to do this multiple times. I know that as a TO in the past, I have really enjoyed a good piece that had the durability for me to make it last for years instead of something that was just going to fall apart after 3 games. Anyway, if you would like this video, share this video with your friends, subscribe to the channel. It'll really help me out and help the algorithm, and I really appreciate your time today. So let's get started. So of course you need your terrain piece, whatever that might be. So we're going to set this to the side. Another thing that we need is plasticard. I tend to like the 3 millimeter plasticard, but I also have some 2 millimeter. You just want something that's flexible a little bit, but not so flexible that it's just going to snap. But once you put a terrain piece on here and the sand and all the other things that you're going to do, 2 or 3 millimeters should be enough. I get a lot of my pieces from local sign shops. But you can also buy this PVC board, and you want the solid. You don't want the stuff that's like foam core, where it has foam in the middle and then two solid pieces on the outside. Durability wise, that stuff's not going to hold up like solid card will. But I like this PVC, and like I said, I sometimes get it from a local sign shop. You might have one of those around, but you can buy this right off of any hobby store. Will typically have 2 to 3 millimeter PVC board, or even offline, from one of the online retailers that does this kind of thing. So, the first bit was the terrain. The second bit was this PVC board. We're also going to need clippers, a hobby knife, a retractable knife, and retractable because, slips in and out. I'm going to use a file just in case I need it. I'm not sure I will. I like to keep pliers around because once we start cutting this PVC, sometimes you want to snap it at a certain point. Having a pair of pliers is a good idea. And then, of course, I always have a couple of other things. Move all that out of the way. I always have a paper towel just in case. I like to use one of these automatic, tubes of indoor-outdoor construction adhesive. That's what I'm going to adhere the terrain piece to the board with, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. And then, of course, you always need like a sanding block or sandpaper just to kind of, smooth up any edges or problems that you might have along the way. Now, a whole list of what I just said is in the description of this video. You can just scroll on to the description, take a look at it. And if you think I've left anything off, just put it in the comments and let me know, other tools or things that you might add. So today, what we're going to do with this terrain piece is, the whole video, I'll be clipping this out. I'll be designing what piece goes on what piece of PVC for the base plate. We'll be cutting the base plate to fit those pieces. Then I'll be sanding the base plate and shaping it up just to make sure it's ready. Then I'll adhere with the construction glue the terrain piece to the PVC board, the base plate. And then the last thing will be prepping it for the next step. And the next video after this one will be adding sand and other accessories to the pieces to get it ready for priming. So the first thing we have to do is start clipping this out. And of course, I'm just going to use regular hobby clippers. Remember, they're shaped a little bit funny. There's a flat side and a beveled side. When you're clipping models or miniatures out, you always put the flat side up against the actual piece of terrain. And I'm just going to clip these really quick, and then we'll be right back with the next step once I have these clipped out. Okay, now that I have this clipped out, I just want to point out one of the things I always do is these sprues like this, I never throw them away. I actually clip them into a little bit smaller pieces, save them to the side. You can always use them as heavy rubble or iron bars, things like that. I even have an old-timey meat grinder where I chop these things up, and sometimes you can just get like a coffee grinder or whatever and stick these things, and you're going to tear it up eventually. But what that does is you can make heavy rubble instead of just sand, which is very useful in other terrain, other terrain projects that you're working on. So never really throw these away until you get a big pile of them and you say, I can't take anymore. Okay, now that we have the pieces clipped out, now I need to go in and do more of the fine work, where I'm going to just take my file and I'm going to clean up any of these sprue marks. It's not a huge deal because you know, you're going to put a lot of sand and other terrain, you know, like accessories and stuff around these, but you just don't want that big honking mark to be on your model or your terrain piece later. You know, when you get stuff that's 3D printed, a lot of times it'll have marks just like that, or resin. And the best thing to do is just to clean those up a little bit. They don't have to be perfect, you just want them to be pretty smooth. So when it comes to painting, you'll never see it. And when I finish these up, we'll come right back with the next step. You can see that this piece has mold lines all the way across it on every edge. And I like to take those mold lines right down so that it's smooth and you don't see that mold line later. Some of this stuff will be hidden because of the way it works when it glues to the other piece. But when you're gluing one PVC or one plastic to another with plastic cement, roughing up that surface with the file will give more texture for your glue to adhere to. It's always a good practice to just kind of rough that up, and that way it'll stick better later. And you just want it to look as smooth as possible on this other side so you don't see that pesky line later on the tabletop. Okay, now you can see that we're all done with that. You know, we've got several pieces here. You can tell that this piece goes like that. So I'll glue that in a little bit later for the next video. Really today, it's about getting these pieces on the base plates. So the next thing that'll happen is I'm going to set these aside. I'm going to show you, maybe not on the biggest one, but maybe this one. I'm going to show you adhering it to the base plate so that you can kind of see the process of that. What I'm going to do is take one of my sheets. I think this one will do. And I'm going to place it on here just so I kind of get an indication of what I want to do with it. Now, one of my secrets that I like to do is I don't like to leave any square corners on any piece. I like to round off everything. It just makes it easier on the tabletop, as well as it's not going to get caught on anything when you're putting your terrain away. And nothing in, you know, your terrain pieces, nothing in nature is going to have a square corner. If you're doing a city block with a building and you want a sidewalk, maybe you leave the square corner, but otherwise I always take them off. Like 99% of the time, I'm doing rounded corners. And what I do is I take my, you know, utility knife here. You can use other things. You could use a Dremel tool. You could use all sorts of different things. I just prefer the extendable, retractable knife to do this type. this part of the hobby with the base plate. I'm showing it to you how I would do it, but there are multiple ways to do this. Don't think there's just one way. And what you want to do is kind of just, center that piece up so that you get a good, a good feel. I'm going to do it like this, and I'm going to take that corner off and then come over here and do like that. So I got a big swoop, and then on this corner, I know you probably can't see that, but I'm going to take this corner and kind of round it and just round it all the way. Now I can pull this piece back off. And what I need to do is just go in here and score this a little bit deeper. So the next thing will come right off. You just want to, and sometimes you have to score this more than once, to get it to be deep enough. But usually I can get it with 1 or 2 cuts. You just don't want to cut it too short so that it doesn't fit. But you can see now that I've scored it, it'll just break off, where I've cut. You can see I'm just peeling that away. So there we go. I took the piece, I broke this off. Don't ever really get rid of these pieces like this because you never know where you might need them. But once again, once you have a big pile of it, you probably could, stop keeping it. And then all I'm going to do here is I'm going to clean this up just a little bit so that we have no real sharp corners like I was talking about. I have to cut that one more time. Go. This is what I was talking about with the pliers. If it's a real small piece, sometimes a pair of pliers just does the trick. Now I just need to clean up 1 or 2 other little small spots, and that looks pretty good. Now what I like to do is to go back with the hobby knife, and I like to, you really shouldn't cut towards yourself, you should cut away. Once again, be very careful when you're working with a knife. But I like to take off the edge on the top side. I leave it on the bottom, but on the top, I tend to bevel it just a little bit with the knife. What that does for you and your miniatures is then your miniatures aren't so topsy-turvy on it. And, it's not so jarring to put like a base partially on the terrain piece so that you run into less of an issue. I'm just scraping with the flat edge. But anyway, your base is less likely to cause an issue if you bevel that edge just a little bit. And once again, that way it's not going to catch on anything in your terrain. When you're putting your terrain away on a shelf or anything, you don't want this to catch on anything if you can. And the more you clean it up, the better off you'll be. Now that I have that cleaned up all the way, I'm going to come back with my piece, and I can kind of see, where my piece is going to go. And you can kind of see that I've, put the piece on a base plate, and it's a little bit bigger than the terrain piece itself. And what that does is it helps me to maintain that this can be a small movable piece. I'm a big proponent of having modular terrain that I can move around and change the table from one setup to the next, but use the same terrain pieces over and over again. And like I said, what this base plate does is once you adhere this to it, you're going to put the sand on it, we're going to paint it. What happens is this becomes a very durable, solid piece of terrain that's not going to get broken, chipped up, and damaged as you play games, especially if you own a store or you're a TO and, your terrain's getting used over and over, week after week, day after day. You want it to be as durable as possible. And if you're just a hobbyist and you're playing at home, you want to make sure that if you're spending time doing this, that you have a good, solid piece of terrain that's going to last you for years. Now, what I like to do once I have it to this stage is we're about to adhere this piece to that, but best practices to adhere it is to actually score up this base. And that's what I use the sandpaper for. I like to just sand the piece a little bit and go different directions. I know I'm shaking the table, I'm so sorry. But anyway, if you score up that a little bit, and I can feel it, there's a real edge to it now. Before this side is super slick, right? This side is roughed up and I can feel it. What that does is it gives a better surface for this to adhere to. So I'm going to take this construction glue. Like I said, it's an interior-exterior construction glue. And I like these automatic feeders. I don't like the ones that are just in caulking tubes. The reason is that I feel like I have more control with this. But anyway, what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to try to gently get this out, is I just want to go along this edge. Nothing too thick and too much, but enough to adhere it to this base plate so that later it won't move around. So now that I have that bead on there of the construction adhesive, I'm just going to put it on the piece, kind of wiggle it into place, and then what I need to do is take my finger or a tool, anything along those lines, and just kind of smooth up the edge with this adhesive so that it's not just jutting out everywhere, making a mess. If you get some up on the miniature, the terrain piece itself, it's not a big deal. As long as it's not super thick. If it's thin, you'll be able to paint right over it with no problem. And thus why I keep a paper towel. And I can just clean this up just a little bit with the paper towel. All right, now I have my terrain piece adhered to a base plate, and that didn't take us very long to do. And this is stuck on there pretty good, but you probably need, when I do something like this, I tend to let it sit overnight before I go back and do the next step. If I was sitting down to do this like all day, you could probably go back to this, say, in 2 hours, 1 to 2 hours. If it was really stuck on there and you couldn't move it and the glue, the adhesive wasn't wet at all, it was dry to the touch, you could probably go on to the next step, which I'll get into in the next video. But anyway, you can see this is what we wanted to accomplish in this video. I'm going to cut out the rest of these base plates for all the rest of the terrain. And when you come back for the next video, you'll see all the pieces put together in this stage, and we'll do the next step, which is adding sand and other accessories to the base plate to really make this terrain piece soar. All right, well, thanks so much for your time. I hope you learned something new today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.